afternoon. I'm Judge Carol, the creator and host of Ask Judge Carol, a video and podcast series where I educate and demonstrate how the law applies in our everyday lives. My aim is to provide you with information that equips you to move forward confidently in your decisions and in life. And if you're here with me today, I'd like you to just drop a note in the chat and say hi. And as we go through, if you have questions that come up, then also please drop them in the chat. So last week, we began looking what the law says about making a claim when a loved one has died in a traffic accident. And I also explained the role and process of a coroner's inquest. Today, we turn to a different and in some ways a little bit more complex area, claims arising from an aircraft accident. As we'll see, the rules here are not the same as for a road traffic claim, and anyone affected needs to understand those differences before they start. Now, to set the scene, you will remember that we had in this country a few weeks ago now a very a serious aircraft accident that involved the passengers and crew. I think the lone crew would have been the pilot aboard a Flamingo Air Cessna 402 aircraft. And the Bahamians and families are now left to navigate the loss and to understand what the law says and how the law can help them. So this accident happened on the 10th of July, 2026, near the San Andres Airport. So what does the law say? Unlike the road traffic claim that we discussed last week, an aircraft accident is not covered by the Road Traffic Act, obviously. It falls under the carriage by air order under the statute law of the Bahamas. It's also affected by the Civil Aviation Act and falls to be investigated by the Aircraft Accident Investigation Authority Act. And together, these legislation and these bodies will determine how liability is established, who may be responsible, and how a family's claim must proceed. So the legislation and the provisions that I referred to are based on international regulations regarding aviation and aircraft travel, based on something called the Warsaw Convention, and then you have local legislation. And interestingly, the rules that relate to domestic travel, so from one port in the Bahamas to another port in the Bahamas, differ somewhat from international regulations, meaning not international regulations, but the rules that govern international air travel. And so when you are considering what are the provisions for such circumstances, that's going to be one of the things that your lawyer is going to have to give consideration to, the fact that this was from one domestic port to another domestic port. So the civil aviation rules say that a carrier is liable for damage sustained in the event of the death or wounding of a passenger if the accident which caused the damage or the death took place on board the aircraft or in the course of any of the operations or embarking or disembarking from the aircraft. Once you're getting on a flight, if you're boarding the flight or disembarking, or the flight doesn't take off or it doesn't land or there's an incident, all of those, so kind of from end to end in the journey or the intended journey, and an aircraft was involved, then the civil aviation regulations will apply to that situation. Thank you for joining. Thank you for tuning in. Okay, so and then importantly, the limitation period for bringing a claim is for a period of 2 years. You have 2 years to bring a claim from the time when the journey would have ended or stopped. So basically, or in this case, we're talking about from the date of the accident. So under fatal accidents claims, normally you would have a 3-year limitation. In this particular case, with aircraft, there is a 2-year limitation period. So that's an important distinction to bear in mind. And then the claim is against the carrier or the operator, the airline operator or the aircraft carrier. Potentially, the claim would be against also the maintenance provider, and even potentially against government aviation authorities, depending on the facts. Because as you would expect and imagine, there are licensing and regulatory provisions for bodies that operate aircraft. And the aviation authority has the power to license aircraft to operate, as well as to cancel or suspend a license for aircraft to operate. So these are all relevant considerations in determining these questions around liability and compensation, potentially insurance claims, whether aviation conventions can affect the value or structure of a claim and the amount that a person or bodies are able to recover. Now, when I was looking at this matter, I had actually been hoping to have someone to come on to discuss this in a little bit more detail. So I'm only really giving a broad outline here because there are a lot of technical rules, but I still thought it would be beneficial and helpful to give you a general understanding so that, we've talked about the who and we've talked about the when, who a claim can be brought against, and then who it can be brought by and the limitation period. And if I have an opportunity and I can get someone to come on to maybe give us a little bit more detail, then certainly I will be doing that because it's helpful for us all to be able to understand. So the key takeaway on this point is the traffic accident rules and limitation periods for vehicles on the road are different from aviation rules, and also who the claim can be brought against, airline operator, aircraft owner, maintenance provider, the persons against whom you can bring a claim, who a claim can be made against, differ in the case of aviation incidents. Now, I would like to mention today something about a claim for damages. The aviation rules talk about damages and damage claims and so on. Now, the term, a reference to damages, I'll put that in air quotes, a reference to damages, meaning a claim for monetary compensation. When we talk about damages in the legal context, we're talking about claims arising from a loss that can be tied to a legal liability. So one of the things we would say is damages is a term of art. And that's why we talk about damages, use the expression and that word damages as opposed to claiming money or getting a money claim. Because of course you can show, for example, that you have suffered a loss or you've been caused a loss that can be measured and worked out in terms of a money claim, but it might not be something that the law recognizes as being tied to a legal liability. So, for example, I'm thinking about the aircraft tragedy, which, of course, was really a horrendous accident. And I'm just going to pause for a few seconds here because it's one thing to talk about technical rules, but it's another thing, and it's emotional and stressful to for persons who we lived and worked and moved with, to be taken away from us so violently. And I would like to express my personal sympathies, my condolences to all the families, friends, and loved ones who have been affected by the tragic incident that was the Flamingo Air tragedy on the 10th of July. So please have my sympathies. This is a good point, actually, and picking up where I paused a moment ago, picking back up there, to give the illustration about a suffering damages. So when we talk about, measuring that loss in money compensation, of course, the value of a life. Who's going to try to put a dollar value on it? Really, I think you would agree that it's impossible. Was their life worth $100,000, $1 million, 10 million, 100 million? Who could say? So, in this system of law that we operate in the Bahamas and in the Commonwealth Caribbean, of the Commonwealth jurisdictions, there is a way of measuring damages that has been developed as a system. So the idea is not that we are trying to put a money value, we're not trying to put a price on the life, but it's a system for acknowledging the loss and a way to measure that compensation. So things like the amount of money that person could have been expected to earn over the course of their lifetime. Or in the case of a dependent, the monetary value, the dollar amount of the support that a dependent would have received over the course of the relationship. For example, if it's a child and the person, the loved one was paying school fees, they were providing a roof over their head, transportation, meals, all of those things we are able to calculate, put a value on, and those fall into the calculation of what compensation is paid. So remember now, we're not talking about how much was the life worth and trying to put a dollar value on the worth of the life. The courts have developed a system of calculating the compensation based on identifiable factors that I've just given you examples of, that we can say, well, this is the worth of the loss, or this is what the loss is that I've suffered. Now, as another illustration, for example, of what would not be covered in a claim for damages. So you have instances where, let's say, we were talking, there was a band that was traveling to perform in Andros. And that band, I recall reading in the news that band had recently signed a contract to perform at a hotel. I think it was maybe for a season, a series of performances, and so on, right? So, you know, the particular hotel may say, well, we've lost the value of um, we've lost the value of that contract. We would have had the band performing one night a week or three nights a week. And because we were going to have a live band in the house, we could have expected that our venue, the restaurant or the bar or lounge or whatever, could have expected to receive increased revenues as a result of having a live band perform. And so they would say, well, we want to claim, potentially they could say, well, we want to claim because we've suffered a loss that we can calculate in money for the band no longer being able to provide the service. And look, we have a contract in writing saying that they're going to provide that service. Now, I would think that that is something that the courts would treat as what we call too remote, too far removed from the uh, from the loss, from the incident, or their claim is too far removed. So I use that as an example that not everyone who suffers a loss, who suffered a financial loss, or not everything. So a lot of times, other businesses, other people in relationship would say, "Oh well, I would have stood to benefit. I would have received some kind of gain if the band member was available to provide the service, to perform. If the even something like a band member who was a keyboardist and they used to play in church on Sundays and the music was amazing and the offerings, they always had a good offering, for example, when that person was on the keyboard and the music in church was really good. And so we want to claim for a reduction in the amount of tithes. I don't know if you think I sound far-fetched, but factually, in practical terms, that could well be the case. The issue would be for the court as to whether that person or that body could make the claim. Is a church going to file a lawsuit against an aircraft for lost tithes? Or offerings because a band member hasn't been able to perform, or even the festival where they were supposed to perform. People might have canceled their trip because the band isn't going to be there anymore and they specifically wanted to go. So then the hosts of the festival, they would have also suffered a loss. So I think, and I hope that you're getting the picture for how far and wide this net of economic loss, financial loss, monetary loss can extend when you have cases where something has happened and someone has suffered a loss due to the negligence of another party. And I say all of that to say that the law has set up a system so that the chain doesn't go on infinitely. It doesn't go on ad nauseum, because then there would always be someone who could come up with another claim, a claim related to that scenario. Or for example, if you're an immediate family member, if it was a child of yours, and Bahamians, we have this expression: when an older person has a child, they're a lot older, 40 or 50 years maybe, than the child that they've had, or even 30 years. And we say, that's my pension child. Yeah, that one there, that's my pension. So with the concept that I'm an older person, this young child, they're going to be able to support me in my old age. Is that parent going to be able to claim pension? Now, they might be able to show a dependency, which the law would recognize, if the child was contributing to household expenses, or they had an arrangement, and maybe the young person had a job and they used to pay pay off a loan or that kind of thing, that might be a closer nexus. But to say that, well, I was hoping that in 15 or 20 years, they would be able to contribute to my welfare and my well-being at a future date, that is the kind of thing that the courts would say is too remote, too uncertain, and not something that a court would make an order in respect of a specified sum of money that the company or the body that is liable for the negligent act has to pay. So that's the system, the system of remoteness, whether it's close enough to be, whether it can be identified, whether it is sufficiently close of a claim, and whether the person for whom the claim is made has a sufficiently close relationship, those categories of dependents. So who are eligible to make a claim. You know, there's that legal phrase, locus standi. That's Latin. It just means if you have standing, if you have a claim of right that the law recognizes. Okay, so just throwing some Latin in there for you. So, but yes, absolutely, it is, you know, this is all a very serious topic and important for you to know and to understand. So the bottom line is when you're looking at whether someone has a right to make a claim, then the next question is, what can they claim? And the civil aviation rules, they have a limit as well in terms of a dollar amount. I think, I'm not even going to say the figure because I don't want to skew people's concept, and it really depends on a lot of factors, okay? So I hope this has been helpful. This brings us to the end of today's discussion on aircraft accident claims and claims for damages. As always, the law can feel overwhelming in the midst of grief, but understanding your rights is the first step towards moving forward with confidence. If today's discussion has raised specific questions for you, I invite you to visit my website, www.judgecarol.net, where you can submit your questions directly to me. I may answer them through a post or even address it on a future podcast. And while you're there, be sure to request your free copy of my Will Preparation Starter Kit, which is a simple and straightforward guide to help you begin protecting your loved ones before tragedy ever strikes. So you can email me at info@judgecarol.net or send me a note through the website www.judgecarol.net. Until next time, I'm Judge Carol, and thank you for watching.